So thank you for introducing me and also for inviting me to have a talk here. Well, I'm curious how it might turn out to be because I'm not used to this genre, which is so. I will try to do my best not to be too much boring and not too much confusing. Uh, I I wondered whether I should choose rather an empirical, highly empirical study or a theoretical study. But in the end, I have decided to speak about a more theoretical article I have been working on for some time, because without data and without empiric there is no good theory, I think. So it is not without any linguistic material, but it is not focused on it, and there is no automated processing of data and statistics and so on, but something more to think about theoretically. So I will try to very informally try to show you, which I thought was the aim of this series of lectures, to show you which methods I use. Sometimes I would even say it is any methodology. Of course, there is methodology in it, but the very process of getting the ideas and the books I usually work with, or the databases and so on, and I will see how long it will time today, and then possibly modify the second lecture according to today's lecture. So I'm going to share my screen, my PowerPoint presentation. I think I can, because I will switch windows, so I'll leave it like it is, like this is not useful screen. My talk will be about measuring degree of nominalization in Classical Chinese, and about the very phenomenon nominalization in Classical Chinese. In fact, this is some kind of theoretical prerequisites and basics regarding what nominalization itself in Classical Chinese is, because there has been many people have been talking about nominalization in Chinese and Classical Chinese, but very often they do not agree on what they mean by that term. I called it in a quite stupid manner between philology and typology, but there is something about it, because I think that philology must be the very basic, the very foundation of a linguistic work, this close reading of text and understanding the text. But on the other hand, doing, for example, only Chinese linguistics without any reference to typology and general linguistics is much less fun and much less exciting. I think that, for example, Classical Chinese is a language that should be studied in the framework of typology and deserves to be studied so, because otherwise it is just enclosed in its own philological tradition. And on the other hand, typology or general linguistics tends to disregard the data from this relatively interesting language. So this is why I called this in this way. And the second slide is an example of what I mean by nominalization and various degrees of nominalization. I've chosen an example from the mods, which I just happened to read through, and I came across this one sentence, which is a nice example of this. We have this Xing Li Sheng Yi Randang this appropriateness of one's behavior stems from having been guided in what is right, which features several degrees of nominalization, which I show in the third picture. You can see that, and that is the problem, that this various degrees of nominalization are sometimes called by with different terms, or when one speaks about nominalization in Chinese, so he has in his mind very different things. So it may be one of those of these three levels, or all these three levels, and so on. So first of all, we have this subject singly, and predicate, this verb with the preposition ü, and its object rantang, which at this highest level one must or can presume that there is some kind of light nominalization here, because this is subject and predicate. One's behavior is principled, let us say, and rantang is to die in what is right. So these are predicative phrases or clauses, but this functions as subject. It is one as subject to this preposition, and in a sense they must be nominalized. But this kind of nominalization is the least prominent one would say. So this is at the second level. Here it is singly. Where is the subject and its predicate li here is this principle and more appropriate, but sing, read traditionally in the fourth tone, is here not to behave, but it is behavior, and so this is this I would say the deepest layer of nominalization, which is even lexicalized and is shown by this suffix s with this grang and grangs. So that's why we read it traditionally sing, but not sing. This here on the left, and then on the right we have this word tang, which is adjective. But here it is the object of the verb run, to die in some kind of dying stuff. And here tang is not adjective anymore, but it is this systemic kind of systemic and systematic kind of nominalization, whereby adjectives can function as nouns with the meaning the thing or the person which has this property. So this is to be died in what is right. So the tongue is to be right, to be appropriate, but here it is the things that are appropriate. So it is another kind of nominalization. So we maybe should start to. That was my impression, that we should start distinguishing these degrees of nominalization. So let us look what on what. Sorry. So I have these sources of inspiration in a conceptual framework. This does not mean that I'm the most important linguist of Chinese in the world, but simply that the topic of word classes and word class flexibility, to which nominalization in fact belongs, is my old beloved topic. It was which I studied in my dissertation, which was published as word class flexibility in classical Chinese. And I focus on verbal and verbial uses of noun, which is the opposite process, not this nominalization, but this verbalization and unverbalization, let us say. But I think this is just the opposite direction of practically of the same process, we can say very, very roughly. And then I wrote an entry for this Encyclopedia of Chinese Language and Linguistics on word classes in classical Chinese, which constitutes the theoretical framework which I use as the departing point, let's say. So that's why I started to be interested in this phenomenon. But the immediate impulse was my long-standing, though intermittent work on Thesaurus Linguae Seritae or Seritae, as Christoph Habsmeyer wants to have it. Last years, I have been intermittently working on a complete analysis of the Xunzi, and during this work on it, which I will show you the interface and the problems I had to go with. I started to talk about this kind of things with Christoph Hausmann, and I started to write down for my own internal use some notes on these degrees of nominalization, so that we could, for example, implement it in this analytical system of the database TLS. I can show you what I started to do. This is, yeah, here it is. I hope you can see it. This is this homepage of TLS, and go with the text. Sometimes it takes some time, so for TLS. You can go to the Xunzi. Now I am in the 8th, or I think it is the 8th chapter already, but when these problems already surfaced in the beginning of Xunzi, so must wait for some. I wanted you to have the opportunity to see how to work with TLS, but now, yeah, it's here already. So here we have the original text, this of the first chapter, Chen Xue, and here already is the analysis I did. But before I did it, I had to decide all the time, and I can show you the problems which aroused my interest in this phenomenon anew, and the problems that we talked about with Christoph Habsmeyer. Already this first word in the sentence which the gentleman says, or a gentleman said, is study. So one is never sure whether this is in fact, if when one studies, he cannot end, or in one studying one cannot never end, or may not ever stop, and so on, or whether this is really in one's studies. So it is underspecified, but one has to decide first what kind of thing it is, whether it is a verb or it is a noun, because this system of TLS knows only verbs and nouns very basically, and then you can see that here I decided to take it as at studying or studies, which is this, instead of verb we have this this synonym group, which is a broadly lexical field, and here the precise syntactic category, which is this abstract noun, which is active. So it means this is an abstract noun which denotes an action, which is defined here as the attempt to learn about things. But one is never sure whether this is right, because it can be for me, it is different things, you know. In studying, one studies, and if one studies, although it is, of course, basically it is the same. It is all about studying, but you know, these things should be distinguished. I'll come to it. I'll come to it once again later. For example, here we have another problem. It is 木质中生, which means basically this is Knobloch's translation. A piece of wood may be straight to fit the plumb line, but it bends to become a wheel. It can be either two sentences. Wood is straight, so, and it fits the plumb line, or it can mean the straightness of a piece of wood is so that it fits the plumb line. So again, it is underspecified, but one has to decide what kind of thing it is. So again, we come to the question of nominalization, whether it is nominalized and in which sense it is nominalized. So I have this double analysis, just ambiguous analysis. It can be either two sentences in this particular case to be straight. So if a piece of wood is straight, is as straight as to fit the plumb line, or it can be the straightness of that piece of wood. So the second possibility is here the nominalization, which is something different from that study or studying. Here we have this nominalization of an adjective, which denotes the property itself as an abstract entity, so it's straightness, and we have this parallel sentences which shed some light already on this mudra, as it is very typical that in the first half of this parallel construction, one is at loss, and then the second part sheds some light on the first part of it. So here it is very it is quite explicit, because we have this she, its, or his, and so on, or in any case, this she cannot be taken as an independent adjectival predicate, because we have this marker of some degree of nominalization, whether it is very weak one, or it is we can translate it theoretically like it's being round, but which is a very slight nominalization, but also its roundness, which is more natural here, so that its roundness fits the compass. So here we can see that it is nominalized in some way, and then maybe we should prefer the analysis, this nominal analysis for J. We have this. We have of course some cases of morphosyntactic nominalization with the use of grammatic words. So we have this J, for example, the fact that it will not be straightened out again, but that's something I did not focus on in my study. And here we have another case of quite natural and slight nominalization, but still, because this rho, rho is to twist, to bend, but here it is the subject of the sentence, so it must be nominalized in some sense. And of course, here it is translated with the bending, the twisting or bending. So again, it is an abstract noun, action noun, which denotes an action. So then we have here another kind of nominalization. We have this word which is derived from the word to understand, but here it is written with a different character, which says something, although not, although it is problematic, because we know that both words were written in the same way in the excavated manuscripts and so on. That this is the normalized mode of writing from the Han on, but still, you know, it is relevant. It is a different character in the eyes of the Han editors, so it meant already something. This is one thing, and the other thing is that that it is read again in the fourth tone, in this suffix, which means that we have this like word formation, usual word formation. And it says that it does not mean understand or to be intelligent, or it does not mean understand, but it means intelligence or to be intelligent. So here it is intelligence again. Then still, one can see that it is ubiquitous, in fact, and then one has to really think about this phenomenon before he starts to analyze such a text, and to have it in the system, then these levels of nominalization. Here we have another interesting sentence. His actions will be without inadvertent transgression. So we have this sing, and we can wonder whether it is to be read sing, this behavior, or sing in the second tone. This would be, because sing means behavior, and sing is not a term in itself, but would mean something when behaving or something, or when doing things maybe. But in any case, it is nominalized again, either slightly or very much. And then again, this quo, in fact, originally is a verb, and this is his already well entrenched and well lexicalized nominal meaning, transgression. But originally it is a verb, transgress. So we have this non-lexicalized nominalization, lexicalized nominalizations, nominalizations that are marked morphologically and that are not marked morphologically, and so on. So that's yeah, so we could go on. Maybe we can come back to this in the next lecture, for example, if you are interested, because maybe it is still the most interesting things in my talk than these theoretical things and literature and bibliography and so on. So, but this is that was the start and the of the idea that I should deal with this in more detail. So I'll go back to my presentation. For this, I decided to use my my favorite theoretical publications from general linguistic publication, because as I already said, I think that without general linguistic, to do historical linguistics of Chinese without this general this framework of general linguistics does not give much sense for me, at least, and has many disadvantages, I would say. So when I was working on my dissertation many years ago already, so I just by chance I came across this the first two titles, not at the same time, of course, but and I thought it was ideal for my purposes to somehow to handle the very tricky problem of this word class flexibility and what word classes are. So, both are very useful for typological research, Croft's radical construction grammar and Langeker's foundations of cognitive grammar. And only later I found out that actually that typological literature is full of quotations of Croft and Langeker, and that it constitutes a kind of strand of linguistic thought. So, but at the first time it was just by chance. But since that time, I know that this is useful to use for such questions, because it is not because it is designed so that it can capture languages that are not, for example, that are not similar to English or standard European. How is it called? SA. The standard average European. And for the distinction between nouns and verbs, I was really happy to pick up Langeke's Foundation of Cognitive Grammar, because only here one can see why, for example, it is not true when it is asserted that, for example, love is not is no real noun, because it denotes not to a thing but to a process, for example. So I think I have been always enraged by this rough semantic analysis of words and word classes. So I think he really offers very good apparatus for capturing this very fine distinction between the basic word classes. So that's why I quote both these books. And then for this occasion of my research on nominalization, I use Sonia Christopher's Subordination and Kaptivskaya Tam's Nominalizations, which both are typological studies across several hundred of languages, where Classical Chinese is only one of many very weird languages. So I wanted to know where Classical Chinese stands, in fact, and whether there are any universal features of subordination nominalizations. And of course, I discovered that they truly are. And I also discovered that both Christopher and Kaptivskaya Tam heavily draw on both Croft and Langeker. So I was happy to know that I am not of the right path, I would say. And then I found very useful two relatively recent monographs on word classes, not in Classical Chinese, but because as far as I know, there are no monographs on word classes in Classical Chinese, but there are two very good books on word class and very sophisticated books on word classes in modern Chinese. It is Guo Rui and Yuan Yulin, who both, again, heavily rely on Croft and Langeker, although Yuan Yulin harshly criticized Guo Rui and so on, but in fact it is the same approach. And here I have some pictures taken from Langeker, where I would like to introduce to you, where we have this. This is quite instructive to see these pictures to think about the semantics of nouns, adjectives, and verbs, and so on. And we have this. We can see in these schemas the process of nominalization. In fact, so we have this verb choose. So we have this trajectory and landmark, which is in fact this this is the patient, this is the agent, in fact, in the traditional terminology, which this agent does something to the patient, which is a kind of spectrum of things, and one of the things are chosen during this process. And in this heavy lines means this is the so-called semantic profile. This is the very focus where the word itself focuses semantically on these these entities, these conceptual entities, and the rest is this background which is necessary but which is not in the spotlight, let's say. So this is choose. Chooser, then, this is one kind of nominalization where we have where only the agent, the trademark, yes, this TR of the original action or event is focused, and then attention is drawn only to the agent of the action, but still the action is here because it is the semantic background for it, because there can be no chooser without knowing what choosing is. But this is not here in the spotlight, but it is only the agent, the so-called trajectory. And then we have choice. That is what I am primarily interested in now, because this is this like study and studying studies and so on, as you could see before. So there's three meanings of choice here. The first one. The first one here, it is another kind of nominalization. This is heavier nominalization, because again, this is the object, but this is the object chosen, this one's choice. This is the whole spectrum of things that can be chosen. And yeah, the last one is this, what I'm interested most, where the process of choosing, where we have a chooser and this choice, what is chosen, which are scanned in time, because this is a verb, which this is this basic feature that it is scanned in time in some way. And here we have this a thick line, which means that it is conceptualized as an abstract entity. It is not the process itself, scanned sequentially in time, but it is one entity that can be manipulated as a thing in our mind. So it can be even in the language, it can be manipulated so as a noun, although it is an abstract noun and has some limitations of distribution, for example, but still it is like with laugh, that laugh as a noun is for us is a thing. It can be measured, a lot of laugh, or it can be counted, 3 kinds of laugh, or maybe even 3 laughs, and so on. So and it is not haphazard that it can be counted or measured, because we conceptualize it as a thing, as a kind of thing, although very, very strange thing, because in its foundations, of course, this is this process, but this process is not in the spotlight, but the whole thing is in the spotlight, and it is just a kind of activity. So we have another series of pictures, this conceptual base of entering, which there is some kind of enclosed space and an object that must, in time, it gets closer and closer, and then it gets within the enclosed space. And this is the conceptual base for various words meaning that mean, for example, enter. We have this, for example, this verb enter, that we have seen that everything must be in the spotlight. The thing that enters in the enclosure, the distance here, that it must be somewhere in between, and this temporal sequential scanning, because we visualize it as a process that really takes part in time. But of course, the same conceptual base can be used and is used for other concepts as well, but then differently conceptualized. For example, we have this preposition where there is no motion here. It is static. There is no scanning in time, but we have this static relationship between the enclosure and the thing that is inside. But with the premise that it might have got somehow inside. So before it was outside, let us say. Here we have entrance, again, entrance as the orifice here, which again we must and we do understand on this conceptual base of entering, but of course now it is not the process itself or the object that enters, but it is the part or the place through which the thing enters. And then we have this entry, which is then this kind of nominalization, this action noun, where the whole process is nominalized as one strange thing, which we can again count, for example, or measure and so on, which is the most abstract one, in fact, the most abstract kind of nominalization. And all these nominalizations are nominalization, this entrance, entry, and chooser, and so on. And we should sort them out, not to take them as the same thing. And here, this is the last, no, not still the last picture. That these are the basic features of semantic features, conceptual features of verbs, infinitives, and nouns as Langecker sees it, this two things in a relationship. There's a relation between them which evolves in time, and everything is in the spotlight, including the time and the evolution of it. Then noun. This is this enter, to enter. This is the entry. As we saw it, have just seen it in the picture above, where this is the conceptual basis which must be there, but it is not important here now that it evolves in some time and so on, but it is manipulated as one specific abstract object, and in between we have infinitive, where it is something in between a verb and noun, where we have this still the changing relationship between one thing and the other thing is in the spotlight, but the time is not so important here. So this domain, this temporal domain, is not so important in infinitive. So that I think is quite inspiring, and for me it proved to be very useful to speak about word classes in classical Chinese in general, not only about nominalization or verbalization and so on. This is the same with adjectives, so I think I need not repeat myself, but again we have this yellow adjective. At least I can say that we have this color space where we have different colors. This Y is yellow, this the region of yellow, and we have some relationship, static relationship that does not evolve in time because it is adjective. It is basically stative. And then we have this trajectory here, which is the object that perceives something as yellow, and so. And then we can have this verb, but we can see different kinds of nominalization. For example, we have this nominalization yellow, which means is the yellow color. So it means this is a domain in the space of colors. This is simply a kind of color field. But we have also count noun yellow, which is only a subset of this color, this domain of yellow. This is a one kind of yellow thing. This is from Croft. So this was Langecker. Croft is Croft for me. Supplied me with this schema beside other things. When you have this typological map of scale between balanced predicates or balanced sentences and deranked non-asserted predicates. So this is in case these are various degrees of nominalization, one could say. So these are supposed to be this typologically and universally valid generalizations about, for example, which phenomena happen to the more balanced sentences and to those more deranked sentences which do not have any predicativity in fact anymore. So I cannot say whether this is really valid typologically, but I tried to work with this idea that we have many degrees of deranking, in fact. So this is not only a balanced sentence and deranked sentence, or only verb, balanced verb and noun, but we have various degrees of deranking, and that means also nominalization. Here it will be I work in my article, which I've been working on with these comparisons, that we have this in the left, we have this examples from English, from Latin, and from classical Chinese. As I see it, of course, these are made up examples. But of course, further on, I will have to test it on the real linguistic material, because it is a bit suspicious to come up with unnatural examples. But still, just in order to get the overall idea of how it should work, these different degrees of nominalization, you can see it is this balanced expression, they hunt has or are hunting has. Then we have two stages of nominalization for English, and then the last one, which is really the most, the heaviest one, I would say. Here we have this are the infinitives or gerunds, or we have relative sentences and so on. The next stage is but the agent is in dative here, them to hunt has or them hunting has, and not in and is not coded as possessor. So it still looks like a verbal form, this to hunt, them hunting. The next stage is more nominalized in that we have this the agent of the original process or event coded as a possessor, their hunting hares or their hunting of hares. This is the next stage, which is quite here special for English. Latin, as far as I know, does not show such. Does not have this stage 2, and the same applies for classical Chinese. And the last stage is real even lexicalized nominalization, for example, hunt, and then we have coding of the object, which is here still retained as real object, post-verbal object. It becomes something different here. So either we have compounds like hare hunting or genitive hunting of hares and so on. So you can see that this is gradual process of nominalization, and it is a good starting point to research Chinese examples, because in classical Chinese we cannot rely on these morphological, mostly we cannot rely on these morphological markers. So it is more difficult for us to conceptualize these shifts, semantic shifts. But once one has this comparison with morphologically rich languages, it gets more clear, for me at least. It is very similar with Latin. We have these constructions with infinitive, accusative and infinitive, or gerunds, or supine, or supine, I don't know how one reads it in English. And in the end, we have real action nouns like venatio, hunting or hunt, or venatus. And again, here we have this, they had hares, these lepores. We have like in accusative, like real objects, but here they are encoded in genitive because this is hunt of the hares. Right? So we have this really parallel processes, and it is obvious that this should be valid for any language. In fact, in classical Chinese, we have very little to say about this as far as the form is concerned. We have this lie tu, to hunt hares. Once it gets in the first stage of nominalization, we can we can have here at least the object, the pronoun for the subject, for the third person pronoun for the subject in direct or dependent sentences, which cannot be, but it cannot be distinguished from the possessor. So this is parallel marking. We cannot distinguish between, for example, their hunting hares and their hare hunt, for example, or their hunt of hares, because it is coded in the same way. We have only one chi, which means it marks any degree of nominalization. Only here in the last stage, one might think about forming a compound like Tulia, this hare hunt, which I don't think is very common, but I will try to look and study this kind of metathesis of the original object into the first part of a compound with the help of corpora. So I will show you, I think, next time. In Chinese, of course I use Chinese literature as well, and I think some concepts may be inspiring, but in general, I'm usually not quite satisfied with the level of sophistication of general linguistic theory in this domain. So still usually very often Chinese linguists draw on these relatively old papers by, for example, Zhu Si and many others, Chinese structuralists from 80s and 90s, let us say, but maybe 80s. But these concepts are very interesting, and again, I employ them as well. First of all, I would say, of course, we have this term for nominalization in general, Minguhua, and it is very often described in the framework of which is this word class flexibility, or word classes being used in unexpected ways, I would say. This word class flexibility, it is the best way how to translate it, more or less. But I really appreciate another two terms, which are Zhu Si's terms from this basic very important article from 1983, this 知识和转指汉语名词化标记得知所知的语法功能和语功能 where 知识 actually means, for example, when we this is the kind of nominalization where, for example, the verb starts to denote the process itself. So we have this to study, one studies, and studying. It's simply, this is the kind of nominalization where like laugh or running or hunting or hunt. This is this zhe. On the other hand, duanzhe, it means that that the shift is more pronounced, and then, for example, that we have this agent for nominalization. So it means that it refers to such terms like chooser or hunter, or where the new word, the nominalized verb, refers not to the process itself, but either to the agent or to the patient, or, for example, to the instrument of the action, and so on. So I think again that we have at least here two opposed ways of nominalization, and that they should be taken into account. There are, of course, some. This is not a domain that would not be untouched by previous scholars. So I can mention, for example, a very nice book by Zhang Wenguo, which in very close terms and in very similar perspective studies this phenomenon of noun verb and verb noun transitions in Chinese without referring to any cognitive grammar or radical construction grammar typology, just simply relying on Chinese domestic linguistics, but again, he comes to very similar conclusions, and he has nice tables of nouns becoming verbs and verbs becoming nouns, and with some statistics and so on. So this is something I appreciated when I worked on my dissertation. And nominal functions and nominalization in classical Chinese, for example, was described, for example, by Jiří Freundlich, but it is a descriptive study where there is a very lot of material, but the theoretical background is a bit different, and it does not approach such issues as degrees of nominalization and so on. And for example, we have Robert Gassmann's syntax for Einbettung Strukturen in klassischen Chinesisch, where we have this Einbettungsstrukturen, this embedded structures, in fact, are nominalized clauses, let us say, so it can be used as well. There are many other minor studies that can be used for this purpose, but I'm not, of course, here presenting a bibliographical guide to it. So, but that's what I, for example, I draw on. Then we have this linguistic material. I test these hypotheses on first of all, I take examples from, because for some transformations and to show what one can do with one and the same sentence, one has to make up sentences. That is, I would say, true, because we simply do not have the same sentence with the same agent, with the same patient, and in the same structure in all its transformations. This passive transformation and nominalized transformation and so on. So one has to infer from the construction itself and from other examples how that sentence might have been transformed. So, but of course, under this condition, one has to be very careful and to always to test these hypotheses on concrete linguistic material, historically attested. And for these purposes, I use to certain degree Thesaurus Linguae Serice. Then I use, and I will show you, I think, next time, Academia Syndicatic Corpus of Old Chinese, which is still, as far as I know, and for my purposes, as I work with on various papers and publications in general, so it always turns out to be the most effective tool. I think this problem with corpora, Chinese corpora in general, which would be really nicely tagged as, for example, corpora of many European languages, including Czech, with very sophisticated syntactic tagging, and so on. This Academia Syntactic corpus of all Chinese is, as far as I see it, is the most extensive one, and at the same time it is annotated, at least as far as word classes are concerned, just with some minor syntactic tagging. So its use is limited, but still it is the best thing I know of, and that's why I work with it. And one can it is possible. There are many functionalities in this corpus, unlike those corpora of Old Chinese that are available, for example, in this BCC or Peking corpus of ancient Chinese. So that's what I use. And then the third thing is Morphosyntactic. This is something I really want to emphasize here, that this is why I spoke about philology and typology. So this I think that these databases can be used to test very quickly some hypotheses, but cannot give the overall impression of the various degrees of this phenomenon, and I would say any phenomenon in the language. So again, working with those very texts we are interested in here by chance. I just happen to read through Morphosyntactic, but it can be anything. For example, that Xunzi I have been working on in TLS. It is the same case. Simply, these ideas and problems arise from close reading of real text. So I simply took Morphosyntactic and read through from the start to the end, and made notes and wrote out just all interesting phenomena related to nominalization, and from this small manual corpus I can take example as well. So it doesn't matter whether it is from one text or several texts for this particular purpose, of course. Otherwise, one should test it against as extensive material as possible. So for examples, several examples, not to test any hypothesis, to have rich data, but just to really to access some specific examples. One can use TLS, and I show it next time. But because there are ways how to approach examples of action nouns. For example, I am interested in noun through these categories. You saw the syntactic categories and semantic categories. You have already seen that many of such examples will be analyzed in the system as NABs, this abstract nouns, with the semantic category action nouns, but there will be many examples under the syntactic category NP8S, which means that it is nominal phrase, which is abstract nominal phrase, and in fact it is nominalized from a sentence. So this is precisely what these deranged or dependent or embedded clauses are. And there are some other possibilities, but TLS has these options, although it cannot be used as a corpus in its own right. So I'll show you next time, because we are running out of time, and I think it will be appropriate. So I can skip this print screen, because I will show you in the and I will share your screen in this live version of TLS. So we have this Morphosyntactic exception, this, as I say, this good or close reading of a text with commentary and concurrent exception of relevant and particularly instructive or otherwise noteworthy occurrences. That is what I did, and again, this is no especially good reason for choosing Morphosyntactic, and it does not matter in this case. So, of course, that is a part of methodology. Like I said, it's no methodology at all. This chance, and of course, one has to use this methodology as a tool, but not as the start of the ideas or the end of the ideas, but just as a tool. So there are many haphazard factors in the process of studying thing and writing a paper on it. So this is just for illustration. This text of Morphosyntactic, which sometimes is entertaining and sometimes is very boring. It depends how you like mods and what you expect of it. And this is a scan of my notebook, and you can see that it is simply no advanced technology, but just a pen and paper and just going through it. And only after that one gets the overall picture what even is possible in that language, and what one has to count with when approaching it and trying to systemize the observations, which in fact are at the most basic level are again haphazard or messy. Yeah, these are the searches I did in AAC corpus, so I will leave it for the next time. But I can show you already that that scales of normalization I devised them for myself in the first place internally. That we have this, as I have shown you, they here there is no normalization at all, and then we have various degrees of normalization represented by these transformations, morphosyntactic transformations, ending with I don't like their hair hands. This compound, and hand is a real noun and not any gerund or participle, but real noun with the original agent coded as the possessor. And here we have a separate kind of normalization when we have no this this self-referring normalization, but is duanzhe when we have the hunting one or the hunted one or even a hunter, where it is not a normalization of the verb, the pure normalization, but this actor nominalization, for example, is hunter is the one who hunts and not the hunting itself, of course. And we have this other labels, which is more or less synthetic, the nature, the character of nominalization, whether it is more or less syntactic or lexical, when this new just this morphology is simply rather flective morphology, and this word formational morphology in English. And then I try to somehow adopt this system for classical Chinese, where we have no morphosyntactic markers for the where there is where the nominalization is very slight. Then we have the marker of dependent constructions, so the embedded clauses with zh or qi, which you can, this is instead of them, we have this there, because qi or zh is the genitive or possessive marking as well. And here, when we have this heaviest kinds of normalization, we can think of having this this word order change for objects. In fact, we have liet hu to hunt hares, but Thulier would be a compound, in fact, so it would be the most lexicalized version of nominalization. And then, of course, we can trace, for example, the use of conjunctions. That for the more syntactic kinds of nominalization, we have this conjunction between two predicates. We have this R, the conjunction R, and for real nouns, very well nominalized verbs, we have already this nominal conjunction U, and so on. So yes, and I'll show you the next time. I will show you the results of my analysis of these degrees of nominalization at the beginning of the first chapter of the Xunzi. But the time is already has run out, and I think there is some time for questions. So I hope it was not too messy and chaotic, and not too much boring for you. So please, I am ready to answer your question, as the case may be.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Zádrapa. I hope everyone can formulate questions and put them in the chat if you like, although we would also like to encourage people to turn on their camera and ask their questions verbally if they are comfortable doing that, to get to see your face. So yeah, like I said, I did not get a chance to introduce Dr. Zádrapa, but I was happy to see in the presentation that some of his publications are included in the talk. So we get a chance to know about his, especially word class flexibility in classical Chinese book, and also his work on the Xunzi. I would also just like to point out before we enter Q&A, because I think many of us joining today, and in fact, anyone wanting to learn more about grammar and syntax, word classes, early inscriptions, and excavated texts will also find useful Dr. Zádrapa's entry in the Oxford Bibliographies in Chinese Studies. So that is an entry titled The Ancient Chinese Language. Is a very good and useful resource if you have access to that. So with that, I think we should open the floor to questions. And yes, feel free to use the chat or raise your hand, and we can unlock your video and you'll be able to ask your question.
Obscure subject, so I wouldn't be surprised if there would be no questions.
Well, I can start off. I mean, I ask a question mainly as someone who's not an expert in historical linguistics, but I became very curious about some aspects of how to use this information as I was listening to the presentation. So, you know, I had been taught some very vague concepts about word class flexibility in classical Chinese, but I thought it was very interesting how you are talking about morphology being vague and leading to a specific kind of problem of meaning. And immediately I started to think about how this relates to translation. Do you find in your own experience that there are some specific examples that you can explain how these linguistic theories, not necessarily about nominalization, but in general about word class flexibility, can offer new ways to think about translation or present different kind of problems for the practice of translation?
Yeah, it's a very complicated question, I would say, and I am not sure I will be able to come up with a concrete example now, but I think it is ubiquitous as far as I can see. And for example, when I analyze that Xunzi or any other text that before I analyzed Xiaoting for TLS as well, so one can see one's own analysis informed by this kind of research. And on the other hand, you can see, for example, Knobloch's translation. One can see that sometimes they get so far from each other that it will be necessary to translate it anew. So there will be this, it's already prepared, this translation by Knobloch, and one empty column for a translation by TLS, and it should be somewhere there, but it is yeah, so it is, for me, it is now very difficult to come up with a practical application for translating. But of course, it is always here, because once you are aware of these various degrees of nominalization and possible nominalizations, then you always take care of translating such thing, and do not proceed it casually, for example. So you always have to think about which kind of thing it is. Then, of course, some kinds of nominalizations are systemic and are automatic, I would say. So it is paradigmatic. You can count on them. So it is nothing special to speak about. And then you have other kinds of nominalization which are more lexical nature, which either you have to, that one should list in a dictionary, for example, and if one, for example, finds out that meaning, that some meanings you can take from a dictionary because they are lexicalized, some nominalized meanings, some you can count with because they are automatic, paradigmatic, and you can be comfortable with these two groups. But then if the meaning that you think the word have does not cannot be referred to any of these two groups, then you have to be very careful, for example, because then either it is a very special formation, or it is a mistake, and so on. So sorry for not coming up with a really one good example of how you can use this obscure things to make your translation better.
Okay, great. I think I saw Madalena raise a hand. Did you have a question?
Yes, it was actually very similar to yours. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I had one request, which was if maybe next lecture you could go back to those tables that you show. I think it was table 4.1, 4.2, halfway to the presentation, and give examples of all the kind of concepts that you were illustrating with those figures. And that was entirely, you don't have to do it now, maybe for next Thursday too. And that was entirely for my clarification. But I had a similar question related to what kind of results you can in fact achieve. And one reason why I ask is because I work in China, and of course I read manuscripts, and you were using instead sources that are not excavated or looted, or they're not manuscripts, and rightly so. I think there's a lot of reason not to do that. But one thing that I was thinking was, you gave some examples, and I remember occasions where I was translating a manuscript with colleagues, and it like there are old signs that this is how you should read the sentence, but then when you read it in context, it makes no sense. So it seems that there are sometimes usages that don't really, that having a sort of schema to tackle the text doesn't help, actually. So I was wondering if you have ventured into that yet, in that area yet.
Not particularly, but my general answer would be that without being able to closely read the text we used as our sources, it will be difficult to obtain a really appropriate picture of those things. So without the ability of close reading of the text, we are lost, I would say. And anything that contributes to this ability of people to read those texts closely, that is with being aware of all possibilities which are either possible, but also that are basically ruled out, makes our understanding of those texts better and finer, I would say. So, and I very often see, not in very often, for example, in publications on the history of Chinese thought and so on, translations which betray this kind of inability of close reading, I would say. So this is just one part of those many aspects of the language that we maybe should be aware of, not maybe in this detail, but for example, that we have really different kinds of nominalizations and they are not the same and they are not common to the same degree and so on. So I think it really may help in deciding what is probable and what not. That's my practical application of this.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? We probably have time for a few more questions if people have them. Yes, I see Giancarlo has his hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
Many thanks for this very interesting presentation. I have an example in this regard. I just posted on the chat.
Yes, it is a nice example, very similar.
I do take part in these TLS meetings with Christopher Hartmann and yesterday, actually, we have, during while translating this passage of the Shuoyuan Tanchong chapter, we have come across this wording that in the sentence, in the first part, one can see qiu tui, right? And then the second part, it's qiu tui. And I think this would be a case that you have referred to as an infinitive.
Yes.
I mean, we have found
these are actually two layers of infinitives of nominalizations. First, if the dai qiu tui is nominalized as a whole, and then tui is nominalized once more as an infinitive. So it is in seeking for retreating, in fact. So these two embedded infinitives. It's precisely. Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm not able to participate in these sessions because I was invited as well, but I'm not able to follow.
Yes, I mean, we have. It was argued that qiu, of course, can be negated by bu, right? Which would mean that it at least has a verbal core.
Yes.
But on the other hand, the whole noun phrase can be pronominalized by zhi. So this is a clear indication that it's nominalization. So we found we have agreed that it is underdetermined, yes.
Yeah, that's a very good example. Of course, pu is one of the best indicators of predicativity or the real heaviest kind of nominalization. So as far as the expression can take pu, so it is still verbal to a certain degree, I would say. So it is a good test of it, and the use of je is a different problem because, of course, you can use je with any predicative construction you want to. So of course you can nominalize anything by this with this pronoun. So. But of course, this is kind of intermediate for me in this respect. This intermediate stage of nominalization when you are still something like infinitive or this them hunting and not the their hunting, where pu is still acceptable. because in her hand there is no possible of negation. In fact, how you can negate real noun. Yeah, that's very nice example.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, well, I see another question that came into the chat. So maybe we can look at this question, and if there are any other questions, we'll be happy to continue next week with part 2 of the talk.
Okay, this is what I think about word classifications in dictionaries. In general, I'm quite skeptical about classifications of words in dictionaries with respect to word classes. I have seen too much in the domain of word classes as to be as to trust. I think it really depends on. I think basically it is useful. I think those categorization Hanitatzedin are mainly practical ones, of course, as in any dictionary. Lexicography is a kind of practical lexicology, although lexicographers don't want to hear this because they think there are scientists as well. But these labels, the word class labels, of course, are practical matters, so they do not delve so deep, of course. But I think, for example, these Hanitatzedin or even Hanitatzedin are okay in this respect, but just for the first. They are useful for first orientation in the lemma. Of course, it is nothing that it does not have anything in common with close reading. So, but common dictionaries are not devised so that they would allow too fine distinctions, because otherwise they wouldn't be practical. But that's what I appreciate on TLS, although it has many problematic points, and we know it is under construction all the time, and it is very spontaneous. But still, this technical apparatus is very fine grade. Maybe the most fine grade I have seen. So it somehow makes us to think about these things which otherwise would go unnoticed, I would say, because otherwise you have some basic grammar, you have dictionary with practical with class affiliations, and then you combine it, and then you don't think about these complicated interplay of lexicon and syntax and the things that are done with classes in classical Chinese texts. So that's, I don't know whether this is okay for you.
So I see Laurent said, thank you for your answer. Okay, great. Well, I think we have taken up a lot of Dr. Zádrapa's time. I know there were probably some other questions, but I think we're happy to continue the conversation next week and bring your questions, and we will continue to learn more about word classes. And if you would like to keep up with Methods in Sinology lecture series, you can also follow us on Twitter and go to the website, which is sinologymethods.com. And yes, we think, I invite everyone to join me in thanking Dr. Zádrapa again for his talk today. And yes, we look forward to seeing you next week. So hope to see you then.
So thank you for staying here and listening to me. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.